Hey everybody, so we're going to look today at doing trailing 12 months. And first thing we're going to go through and do, this is really going to be part one, which is just going through and computing trailing 12 months. So what exactly does this mean? Well, if we look at our annual report, essentially for the years ended, this came out like literally on February 3rd, or for Walmart, it's going to be January 31st of 2024. But as we kind of know, there have been two quarterly reports that have been issued since the annual report. And if we want to look at annualized numbers, meaning that, well, why don't we look at essentially for a year period, basically from this would basically be like 11/5/23. It might be 11/4/23 through, or basically really kind of starting out over here, basically going from this period of time is that for the last year, how do we go through and achieve that? So there's a couple different ways we can do this in terms of approaches. So the easy part is going through and basically finding out, okay, here are my 3 months ended May 4th and then April 29th. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and fill out these different numbers onto the Google Sheet, and then we'll see which one we don't have, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. So do the same, and I'll see you back momentarily. Hey everybody, welcome back. So what I've done is I've basically taken our income statements and I went to all the different prior quarterly reports, and I'm basically showing the 3 months ended results. So you'll go through and do that same very thing for Walmart. But we kind of come to this dilemma. And what exactly is the dilemma? Well, when we're looking at quarterly reports, we kind of we can say that, well, they're going to report the 3 months ended, 6 months ended, 9 months ended, but what about the quarter? So what we're going to have to go through and do is to figure out this 3 months ended. What we're going to need to kind of go through and do is say, okay, we're trying to get to this amount. So what I'm going to need to go through and do over here is that I know what my annual report number is. So what I can do is I can say, well, if I add up these three different amounts, and obviously I can also do this if I have the 9 months ended, 10, 28, 23. But if I take A plus B plus C equals D, and I'm going to come right over here. So this would basically be 9 months ended, 10, 28, 23. Over here, I'm adding these three amounts. Okay. So essentially then my 3 months ended 2/3/24 is going to be the difference between the full year and the 9 months. So right over here is going to be my quarterly earnings, or basically be my fourth quarter earnings. Okay. So as we can kind of see here, my 3 months ended 2/3, or basically, sorry, this is going to be 2/3/24. My 3 months ended 3/2/24 is going to be right over here. Okay, so now we've gone through and we are basically breaking out everything by quarters. Now I want to go ahead and do the same just to kind of go through and complete this chart over here. So we'll go ahead and do the same process, G, H, I. So over here, we'll call this L, and then we're going to have the 9 months ended. 10, 29, 22, G plus H plus I equals K. And then to come up with the 3 months ended 1/28/23, we're going to take the fiscal year ended minus the K. Okay. So again, coming over, just going to go ahead and stretch out these parts over here. So we've got the sum of these three amounts right here. So my 3 months ended. Okay. So now this brings us over to okay. So as we can now see, and just to kind of go through and to check our work, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and compare the net income, the bottom line net income to the full year ended. So my net income here is 4138, or this part right over here. Similarly, my net income over here, this is equal to the 2780. So I've gone through and I've basically done the first step, which is to essentially do the trailing 12 months. Now, when I'm looking at trailing 12 months, I can kind of hopefully try to get a little bit of a better sense in terms of how I'm doing in terms of profitability, basically over the last fiscal year. So if I were to say, if we say trailing 12 months ended 8/3/24, what this is going to be is basically my sales over the last, basically over the last, 4 quarters. Do this. Okay. So now when I take this and I'm now looking at our most recent results, going through and comparing it to our last fiscal year, it looks like I'm doing slightly better. And obviously, we're going to be going through and making some comparisons basically between these two as far as looking at trailing 12 months. But this is the first part of the trailing 12 months that I want us to go through and be able to do. So we're going to have trailing 12 months, 8/3/24. And let's go ahead and also compare that to the trailing 12 months ended 7/29/23. So as we can kind of see here that when I'm looking at my most recent, if I'm comparing my most recent year over year, My revenues are down slightly, but I've improved in terms of getting a better cost of sales. My SG&A is relatively flat. My depreciation and amortization is right about here. Is about relatively the same, but my operating income is up mainly from the lower amount of the cost of goods sold. And then I have more other income than previously. So this is something I could go through and look at. And then on my net earnings are slightly higher, mainly as a result of the lowered cost of sales. So this is the first part over here of our trailing 12 months. This is how you basically go through and compute it. And I look forward to seeing you on our next video. Have a great day.